Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 2 hours of stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. It is the best way to support the content. I don't do sponsorships or anything like that. Not that I think there's anything wrong with doing them, I just don't. I get really paranoid. I'm like, what if it turns out to be like a scam or something? So I just don't do them. So the best way to support the content, the only thing that I ask for is a like on the video. However, if you aren't subscribed yet, you should do that. Also turning on post notifications. We are currently on the grind. Do people still say that? I don't know. Do people still say I'm on the grind? Well, if they do, that's what we're doing. I'm posting a lot lately, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So if you don't want to miss any of these videos, be sure to turn on post notifications. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I backpack around the country. Sometimes I catch a ride with the occasional semi-driver, but mostly I walk. Everything I need is strapped to my back, and I live simply. Most of the time, it's a good life. That's not to say there aren't downsides. I've been mugged a couple of times, spent nights shivering myself to sleep, and been chased off by crotchety old farmers, sometimes at gunpoint. Lately I've been drifting through Nebraska and Iowa, where the cornfields stretch on forever. Rustling in the breeze, I take meals where I can, and I'm not above scavenging from the trash. I was digging through one such dumpster when I heard the distant crackle of thunder. The storm had been building all afternoon, the sky bruising at the edges, thick clouds swallowing the last hints of sunlight. When the first droplets hit, cold and sharp, I knew I'd be walking through a downpour soon if I didn't find shelter. I took a back road, no cars passed, just telephone lines, cattle, and fences. That's when I saw it, far across an empty stretch of land, past the buck and pole fences and the swaying thistles. A house, dark and silent, its windows boarded over like lidded eyes. Beyond it, set further back from the road, stood a barn, peeling red paint, roof sagging at one corner, its wide doors slightly ajar. Something about it made me stop. Maybe the way the last of the light caught on the slanted roof. Maybe the way the shadows pooled too thickly around the entrance. I hesitated. The storm was moving in fast. Wind picked up, whipping through the fields, hissing through the stalks of dead grass. I could keep walking, hope to find shelter somewhere else, but I didn't want to stay in the house. I knew that much. The barn seemed like the safer bet. Lightning split the sky, the rain came harder, soaking through my jacket. The fence was easy to slip through, the mud sucking at my boots as I crossed the field. The house loomed as I passed it, its presence heavy, watching. The barn doors creaked as I pushed them open. The smell hit me first. Damp hay, old wood, something else underneath. Something sour. Inside, it was darker than I expected. The rain on the metal roof echoed, hollow and rhythmic, a sound I normally found comforting, but here it felt different, deeper, like it was coming from beneath the floor. I hesitated, scanning the space. Empty stalls, a gutted tractor half buried in the shadows, loose hay scattered across the dirt, no signs of life. I climbed into the loft, keeping my back to the wall as I unrolled my sleeping bag. The storm raged outside, wind howling through the cracks in the barn walls. I fell into a tangled sleep. A sound jolted me awake. Something rattling in the distance back near the house. I crept out of my sleeping bag and climbed down the groaning ladder. I flicked the light on and stepped outside. The hail still peppered me as I crossed the stretch toward the house. Behind it, a set of storm cellars sat against the ground. One of the doors thrashed up and down, caught in the wind. The basement beyond churned my stomach, the stench of decay thick and cloying as it wafted up. One door remained intact while the other hung open. A splintered board jutting from its frame, jagged nails protruding like teeth where they once held it shut. They had secured both doors in place, yet now one gaped open, the barrier broken. A tingle of doubt crept through me as I wondered if the doors had been forced from within, or if the wind had somehow torn them loose. But the damage was too deliberate, too heavy. Something with weight had done this. I liked this place less and less. Being this close to the house made my skin crawl, though I couldn't put my finger on why. Then I heard it, a rattle at the barn doors behind me, where all my belongings were. I turned. One of the red barn doors quivered like a lip, hanging slightly farther open than I had left it. Another trick of the wind, I told myself. But this place, it felt like stepping into the wrong part of a bad neighborhood. The kind with pit bulls chained up in front yards, where furniture sat on the lawn. The kind where a wrong turn could get you mugged. The feeling sank into my gut like teeth. And yet, there wasn't another soul for miles, and I didn't have any other choice. I walked back toward the barn, flashlight in hand. Then I saw them. Footprints, bare feet in the mud, long toenails trailing deep into the earth. The prints led toward the barn. I traced them back with my light. They came from the storm cellar. I needed to grab my things and leave. I pulled the barn door back and shone my light inside. The hinges groaned. The beam of my flashlight cut through the gloom. A woman stood with her back to me. Hail clung to the greasy strands of her gray hair. Her clothes hung loose and ragged, sleeves torn, fabric stiff with old stains. "That you?" Her voice cracked, rasping through a throat that sounded raw. Slowly she turned. Her movements were wrong, too stiff, like she wasn't used to them. Her face was a mask of sunken gray lines. Patches of hair were missing, exposing smooth, pale scalp. The sockets where her eyes had been were hollow and wet. Her thin lips, shriveled and gray like dried sardines, barely pulled back enough to reveal teeth like worn tombstones. She sucked at the air, a wet, rattling whistle. I stood frozen, my heart thundered. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. She took a staggered step forward. Her dress, torn to shreds, slipped from her shoulders. A sagging breast peeked through, hollow where the nipple should have been. The flesh was gnawed as if something had chewed on her. Large teeth marks sank deep into the skin. I backed away, slow, pulse hammering in my throat. She walked with a hitch, her torso lifting too much with each step, one hand clutching her chest like she was holding herself together. My backpedaling led me to the barn doors, and then I felt it. Meaty fingers hooked into my shoulder, cold as marble, stiff but strong. The grip was steady, not yanking, not shoving, just holding me in place, something testing my weight. My breath caught. "If it ain't Ben," she murmured, lips barely forming the words, voice thick with something rotten, something wet. "Then we got a trespasser." The stench rolled over the back of my neck like heat off a carcass left too long in the sun. It clung to my skin, bloated heavy with something rotten. My stomach twisted. Bile crept up my throat. I didn't dare turn my head. She took another step forward, unsteady, shivering like something barely holding together. But I knew what was pressing into my lower back now. 3 dull points, nudging at my spine. A pitchfork, not yet breaking skin, but promising the possibility. "It's me," I blurted, throat tight. "It's Ben." She stopped, listened. The rattling hail filled the space between us, drumming hollow against the barn roof. "Don't sound like Ben." Her jaw hung slack, words thick, like she was rolling them around before spitting them out. The fingers on my shoulder tightened. The pitchfork pressed in a fraction more. I swallowed. "It's me. I'm just under the weather." The lie tumbled out dry, weak. She cocked her head, sniffing the air like she could smell the truth. Those empty sockets, slick and glistening, twitched slightly as if searching for me. Her face was unreadable, but I felt the shift in her posture, the hesitation, the way she leaned in just slightly, considering. The silence stretched too long, my pulse throbbing. The grip on my shoulder didn't loosen. Finally, she exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Let's get inside then." Her voice scraped against the air. Her tongue flicked out, pale, pocked with holes, slick as a worm, tasting the space between us. The hand peeled away from my shoulder, slow and deliberate. The prongs of the pitchfork scraped against the dirt floor, dragging just enough to make my skin crawl. The weight of it lingered, a quiet, unspoken threat. I turned and he was there, a looming figure in a rotting wool coat, the fabric sagging with filth. His frame still carried the ghost of old strength, though his flesh had turned pale, slack, lifeless. His eyes were gone, dark, yawning sockets. Loose skin hung from his neck in ragged strips, peeling like the rind of an overripe orange. His breath wheezed through the moist, ruined tunnel of this trachea. In the dim glow of my flashlight, I caught glimpses of raw, pulpy layers beneath the gaps in his flesh. His hair, like hers, was patchy and thin, matted with filth. A dampness clung to him, something that brought to mind a corpse hauled from the sea, something that had no business moving anymore. They led me toward the house. When she stumbled past me to take the lead, I caught a glimpse of gleaming bone through the raw nest of her scalp. The air thickened with the smell of old death. My fists clenched. My knuckles burned white. Fear had taken root in my stomach, deep, and it was starting to bloom. There was no one for miles, no one to hear me scream. I had no choice, so I followed them into the storm cellar. My feet dragging, my grip tightened around the flashlight. The walls were damp with black mold, sagging in places, water streaking down in thin trails. The lumbering figure thumped down the steps behind me, still gripping the pitchfork. His gaping mouth worked at the air. She hobbled forward. The room was lined with broken down shelves, rusted cans scattered across the floor. A folding table sat in the middle. 4 chairs slid into place around it. Thunder rumbled outside. The man turned and pulled the storm shutters closed, plunging the room into suffocating darkness. My flashlight was still gripped in my palm. It cast stretching shadows across the damp walls. I imagined them down here before I arrived, alone, sitting in the dark. The thought sent a shudder through me. Were they alive? Were they walking corpses? They smelled dead, but they acted alive. "Sit," she murmured. "Please." I hesitated, then slowly lowered myself into one of the chairs. The air was frigid, the kind of cold that settled deep in the bones. Everything in me screamed that I shouldn't be here. The large male stood in the corner, motionless but breathing. She shuffled into the back room, her steps wet against the concrete. Her shoulders arched forward, not from pain, but something deeper, something mechanical, like a body struggling to remember how to move. As she disappeared into the shadows, I turned toward another room across from me. The door was shut. Moving carefully, I rose from my chair, cautious not to make a sound over the shifting groan of the house and the storm beating its fists against the world outside. I crept toward the door, fingers wrapping around the handle. It turned easily. the door pushing open with a reluctant creak. Inside, 2 large dog cages sat against the far wall. Their heavy metal bars rusted but still looked strong enough. Each one was locked with a heavy padlock. In the first, a mummified corpse lay crumpled in on itself, the dried remains of a young man. His clothes hung to his bones, skin pulled tight like old leather. Cobwebs stretched between his fingers, webs caught in the open gape of his jaw. Ben? Their son? I didn't know for sure, but whoever he was actually dead. Unlike them. I sucked in a sharp breath, stomach tightening as I clamped a hand over my mouth. The sound of her footsteps stopped. I held still, the silence stretched, pressing into my ears. Then a shift, a tilt of the head. The man's ear turned slightly, angling toward me like a dog picking up a distant sound. My heart slammed against my ribs. There was a second kennel. Empty. Why? For me? I waited, breath caught in my throat, forcing myself not to move. His head cocked slightly, listening, but then he returned to his stillness. The vacant slits in his head reminded me of something I remembered hearing about. How the eyes are the first thing that carrion insects consume when you die, because of how soft they are. Was that what happened to them? Her feet resumed their slow, wet shuffle in the back room. Moving carefully, I tiptoed back to the chair, lowering myself into it. Hands curled into fists beneath the table. She re-emerged a moment later, glancing in my direction. She carried a tray and set it down in front of me. Rusted cans of beans, corn, radishes, and other fruits and vegetables sat in a row. The metal was dented, lids peeled open, their edges rimmed with dried blood. Deep grooves from human teeth marked the sides of each can. Inside, a black soup sloshed thickly, rancid and rotting. "Come, Harold, sit. It's dinner time." He moved toward the table, dragging the pitchfork beside him. The prongs carved shallow tracks through the damp sludge on the floor. With a deep groan, he dropped into the chair next to me. They ate slowly, deliberately. Fingers dipped into the cans, scooping up the tar-like slop, shoving it between their lips, chewing, sucking, swallowing, wet sounds. Their hollow eyes never left me. A thick dribble of black ichor leaked from the ragged hole in his trachea, soaking into the filth on his overalls. He didn't react. The chewing grew louder, lips smacking, cracked teeth grinding. The sick, organic sounds filled the room, drowning out the storm outside. He was too close. His shoulder brushed mine as he hunched over his meal. She sat to my right, her rotted fingers stirring the sludge in her can. "You gotta eat. Keep your strength up." She nudged a can toward me, pickled yams. The smell hit me instantly. Sweetness turned sour. Something squirmed in the black slop. I hesitated, swallowing against the bile rising in my throat. My fingers curled around the rusted can. I took a slow breath and pretended to slurp at it. The smell alone was enough to turn my stomach, but worse was the sight of them, their pale hands working the sludge, their mouths smacking greedily around the rotten pulp of canned fruit and vegetables, the rancid odor of botulism. She leaned in close. "I know you ain't Ben." I could feel my eyes widen with terror. As she spoke, black droplets splattered onto my sleeve. My heart thumped hard against my ribs. Her lips furled into a smile. "I know you saw Ben in there." She motioned toward the other room. "Ben tried to leave, tried to go to that university. But we had work to do here. So much to do on the farm." Something writhed beneath her scalp, just like in the cans. A yellowed maggot fell from her forehead. Wiggling on the table, a bright, searing heat burned in my lungs. I needed to leave, to run. Now. We couldn't let Ben go. We needed him here, with us. She smiled, her mouth a black, oozing void. I watched the maggot writhe in a slow circle. Ben wasn't a survivor, wasn't built tough. He stopped working the fields even after we whipped him. Broke his ankle, let it heal all wrong so he could wander the property without hobbles. Nothing taught the boy discipline, so we locked him up. Harold tossed an empty can over his shoulder, belching. A sickly, rotting sweetness filled my nostrils. She chewed at a gristly piece of something, black ichor, dribbled down her chin. He stopped moving in there, couldn't take it. Weak boy. Even Harold and me outlasted him. She reached for my hand, fingers thin and stringy like piano wires. The flesh was damp, her grip cold and clammy like a wet fish. Her cracked nails scraped against my skin. Harold and me, we tried making more babies. They just kept coming out all wrong. Buried 'em deep in the fields. I sat frozen, my mind clawing for sense, for some kind of reality to latch onto. None of this was right. None of this should have been possible. But her touch, deliberate and real, left no room for doubt. Then you came along, wandering onto our farm. A strong young man. Her grip tightened, fingers locking around my wrist. You could be the son we deserved. Just need to make a few things clear first. A blur of movement. Harold shot up from his seat. Before I could react, the pitchfork slammed down hard on my left hand. The middle barb punched clean through. A gunshot of pain exploded through my body. Ugh! I screamed, falling to my knees. I yanked my right hand free from her grip, her nails tearing at my skin. What the? I roared, grasping wildly at the pitchfork's handle. It had been buried deep. The 3 prongs jutted all the way through the underside of the table, my blood trickling from the tips. Grab the leg irons, Harold. I scrambled to my knees, but she only watched, head tilted, listening, that same sick grin stretching her face. Harold's heavy footsteps thudded across the floor, steady, patient, knowing there was nowhere for me to go. If they got those shackles on me, I'd end up like Ben. I'd end up in that cage. My flashlight lay on the ground, its weak beam the only thing keeping the room from total darkness. The same darkness they moved through like blind, naked moles. I lunged for the pitchfork handle, wrenching at it with my free hand, but it wouldn't budge. He'd driven it too deep. I climbed onto the table, bracing my legs against its edge, and pulled, every muscle straining, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Stop it, or I'll put you in that dog cage right now, she hissed, sensing what I was doing, her ruined fingers twitching against the table. I pulled harder, veins bulging in my arms, jaw locked tight, my whole body on fire, the wound in my hand screaming as I put every ounce of strength into the handle. The door creaked before me. Harold was coming. I heard the clank of manacles swinging in his hand, his body a shadow moving through without urgency, knowing he didn't have to rush. I yanked, pulled, my teeth began to ache. The pitchfork gave away all at once. I staggered back, the table pitching forward beneath my weight, slamming down onto her arm with a grotesque pop, nearly tearing it from the socket. She made no sound, no scream of pain, only the raspy noise of her breathing as she lifted her head and grinned wider, her lips curling back, black ichor glistening along her gums. I hit the floor hard, my knees sinking into the slick, stinking filth, my boots sliding as I struggled to stand. I had seconds, maybe less. If I didn't move now, I wouldn't get another chance. I bolted toward the door, slipping, catching myself, my pulse hammering in my throat. I heard Harold behind me, moving faster now, charging like a bull, the walls shuddering with his weight. I lunged past my flashlight and wrenched open the storm cellar, throwing my body into it just as his hand shot through the gap. There was no sound, just the awful meaty crunch as his hand was crushed between the jagged nails on the board that once held the heavy doors shut. I watched, frozen, as his fingers flexed once, twice, the raw skin peeling apart, flesh splitting open, dragging slowly backward through the rusted nails and back into the storm cellar, tearing deep, splitting apart the hand like a ship grinding over a reef. The ruined digits disappeared into the cellar with a thump. I stood there breathless, chest heaving, rain pounding against the earth outside. God, what were they? Were they even people anymore? I rushed toward the barn, feet pounding through the mud, breath burning in my throat. The storm cellars tore open behind me when I was halfway across. I didn't look back, but I heard the splintering wood, the slap of bare feet in the rain. The earth was a mess of deep puddles now, the hail softening into a relentless downpour, soaking through my clothes as I pushed forward. The barn loomed ahead, red and peeling, the place where all of this began. I turned. Through the dark and the rain I saw them. His massive frame, her hunched, twisted silhouette. They were coming, slow but sure, drawn to the sound of me even over the storm. I had to get my pack. Everything I owned, every piece of my life was in there. Without it, I was as good as dead. Even if it meant risking more, losing more, I had to retrieve it. I reached the barn and yanked the doors shut behind me, but the latch was useless, broken on the floor. No way to keep them out. I climbed into the loft, shoving my gear into my pack as fast as my shaking hands allowed. They were close now. I buried myself in a pile of soiled hay, curled tight, pulling more over me, barely breathing. "Shoulda hobbled you the second I saw you," she muttered from below. The tension coiled tight, a wire stretched to its breaking point. He wouldn't be able to follow me up here. Too big, too heavy. But she could. I heard her hands scrabbling against the rungs of the ladder, her feet clumsy as she climbed. The wood groaned under her weight. Then there was a wet, uneven shuffle. She was on all fours now, crawling across the loft, sifting through the hay. I held my breath. She was inches away, close enough that I could make out the thin, cracked line of her lips, the way they barely covered the dark gums beneath, close enough that the stink of her clung to the air, thick with a sweetness of decay. I heard her tongue move inside her mouth, restless, shifting. Her ruined hand, swollen and trembling, dropped into the straw beside my leg. A strand of spit dangled from her lips. I felt it land on my shirt. I forced my eyes shut, clenched my teeth, willed my body to stay still even as my muscles burned with the need to move. My leg cramped hard, but I swallowed the pain, the panic. She sniffed once. Her fingers curled into the straw. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The smell of her filled my mouth, my lungs, the back of my throat. Then she shifted, stilled, decided. And she retreated, crawling back down the ladder without a word. I stayed frozen, barely daring to breathe, listening as they rifled through the stalls below, kicking through piles of garbage and rotted hay. I waited, long after she left, long after I heard his heavy boots drag away. 30 minutes, an hour, maybe more. Only when the rain stopped and the first thin light pushed through the slats of the barn did I move. I slipped down, careful, silent, my wounded hand throbbing deep in my bones. I noticed no birds chirped, no crickets called, no frogs croaked. The land was eerie in its silence, dead in its stillness, cursed, poisoned. For a moment I almost convinced myself none of it had happened, that these things were just illusions, paranoia brought on by exhaustion and old habits clawing at the edge of my mind. But as I crept out of the barn, I saw the soil, trampled by many footprints. Some were mine, most were not. If you're a fellow drifter, if you ever pass an abandoned red barn in the middle of nowhere, keep on walking. I want to start this off with the simple fact that I don't believe in ghosts. At least, I didn't. I'm not sure anymore. Sorry, let me give you a quick background of my situation. Have you ever found yourself making your way into a gas station at the edge of town and turned your gaze towards the sleep-deprived clerk quietly minding his business? Well, you may have met me. I work the overnight shift at my local gas station, sitting between abandoned, dilapidated buildings and a stretch of flourishing forests. The road between being the only connector to these two opposites of life. Now, I'm sure you're probably asking, that sounds pretty sketchy. Why would you work there? I know, because I asked myself the same thing. But the pay isn't bad, and being a broke 20-year-old didn't suit me. The owners aren't bad people, just distant. In my 3 months of working here, I've only spoken to them a handful of times. The interview process felt weird too. All I got was a phone call asking if I wanted the job and I could work the hours. Of course I answered yes. Who wouldn't? And only a few days later I found myself at the front counter with a list of instructions and to-dos. The interior was nothing special, if I'm being honest. Shelves of overpriced candy and canned goods with a set of coolers lining the sidewall. Then there was me, sat up at my desk next to the front door with a squeaky old chair and a cash register that always seemed to want to get stuck every 4 transactions. With all that being said, you would assume that I hate my job, but I don't. It's extremely quiet. I only get a handful of customers a night, and they usually keep to themselves. I grew to think of the insulation as a small perk of the job, but something happened last night that I just need someone else to hear. 1:48 a.m. Leaning back in my chair, I sat making my way through the latest book in my backlog when I heard the familiar ding coming from the front door. Placing my book down, I stood up to face the man who had entered the store. The best way I could describe him was the stereotypical trucker. Boots, blue jeans, Carhartt jacket, and a big beard. Yet he was clean without a single speck of dirt on him. "Evening, sir. What can I do for you?" Giving him my best, "I'm tired, just tell me what you want and leave," greeting I could muster. "Oh, nothing much. Just give me a 20 on the diesel for pump 4. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a $20 bill, handing it to me. As I entered in the information on my keypad, he spoke again. "I'd recommend you stay safe out here. I've heard stories of weird things happening around here. Wouldn't want anything bad to happen." Raising my eyebrow, I glanced over at him to see if he was threatening me, but no. He just stood there waiting for me to give him the okay. "I appreciate the advice, but I've never seen anything out of the ordinary over here. I'd say your sources are feeding you lies." Handing him his receipt, he chuckled as he made his way out of the store, and within a couple minutes he was gone. 2:08 a.m. Another ding resounded in my ears. Placing my book back down, I stood up and identified the new customer. That's when things started taking a weird turn. The same man from a half hour ago stood in front of me. Same boots, same jeans, same jacket, same everything. However, this time his jeans were lined with small patches of dirt. As confused as I was, I decided to leave it alone and just do my job. "Evening, sir. What can I do for you?" Standing in front of my counter, I could feel his eyes digging burrows through me. Luckily, I didn't have to wait long for an answer. "Oh, nothing much. Just give me 20 on the diesel for pump 4. Handing me a $20 bill as he finished. Wanting him out as soon as possible, I quickly entered everything in on my register and handed him his receipt. "I'd recommend you stay safe out here. I've heard stories of weird things happening around here. Wouldn't want anything bad to happen." Having my fair share of this guy's ominous BS, I decided to not encourage this conversation. "Yeah, man, I hear you." With that, he made his way out and tried to return to my book, getting my mind off of this weird customer. 2:38 a.m. Once again, the ring of the front door pulled my attention, and almost as if on cue, he was back. But something was off this time. It looked as though he'd just crawled out of a grave with dirt and residue coating his whole body. And if that wasn't enough, he had thick cuts across his arms and face. However, no blood leaked out of the gashes. Deciding I'd had enough of this charade, I shouted at the man. In hindsight, that probably wasn't the best idea, but can you blame me? "Alright, man, what happened to you? This is your 3rd time here, and it looks like you took a quick detour into the local swamp." Pointing at him in fury or fear, I wasn't quite sure. I looked him dead in the eyes. But that was easily my worst mistake. His eyes were milky, as if someone drowned out the color in them. Retracting my hand, I couldn't help the gulp retreating down my throat. Hell, I wish I could too. As he opened his mouth, his jaw produced a wretched cracking before producing noise. "Oh, nothing much. Just give me 20 on the diesel for pump 4. As if robotic, he reached out and handed me another bill. I could see more cuts and bruises on his fingers. Gingerly, I reached out and snatched the bill from his hand and began to enter it into my register. My heart sank and I felt a frigid chill crawl up my spine as I noticed the small pop-up on the screen. Pump New Balance, $40. I began to sweat as my brain turned in my head. Panicking, I jerked my head towards the window facing the lot. To my horror, no truck sat anywhere outside. As I started contemplating on whether I was going insane or just tired, I felt heat building on my wrist. Spinning my head back to the man, I saw him tightly gripping my wrist. However, I couldn't feel the pressure of his grip. The only thing I could feel was a burning sensation that kept growing as he held my wrist. "Ugh, let go of my arm. What the hell do you think you—" My voice lost all power as I met the horror in front of me. The man now held his face only a few inches from mine. As we made eye contact, his face twisted into a horrifying smile producing cracked teeth. "I'd recommend you stay safe out here. I've heard stories of weird things happening around here. Wouldn't want you to join the rest." At this point, I was frozen in fear. My voice left me to fend for myself, as all I could do was stare at this man standing in front of me. It felt as though we stood there for minutes before I finally built up the courage to say something. "You don't say." Giving him my own wary smile, I was finally able to yank my wrist from his grasp, only to be met with charcoal ring with a small crimson symbol sitting in the middle where his hand previously held. Before I could even look back up, he had already turned on his feet, making his way out the store, moving out of my line of sight. Without a moment to think, I collapsed on the chair. My breathing felt haggard, as I tried to steady myself from what the hell I just experienced. After a moment, I checked my phone for the time. It read 2:40. 2 minutes? I screamed in my head. How the hell could it have been just 2 minutes? Lowering my head, I just decided to surrender myself to this weirdness, and tried to brush it into my mind to finish my shift. But I wasn't so lucky. 3:08 a.m. I was in the back room looking for some stock to put out as the ding rang from out the front. Flinching, I couldn't help but think back to that man. Was he back? Sighing as I accepted my fate, I walked out to the front. What awaited me, however, wasn't what I expected. I'm still not sure what it was either. It looked like a tall man around 6'5". He was dressed in a long black trench coat with a hood thrown over his head. I tried to look into his face, but all I was met with was a deep, dark abyss. It felt as if I was looking at nothing at all. Whatever it was, it quickly made its way to my register and placed a thin white strip of paper on the counter before leaving as quickly as it had arrived. However weary I was of the contents of this note, I couldn't help the curiosity spouting in my brain. So I opened it. The note contained only 2 words written in a soft, thin cursive. You passed. Passed? Passed what? Staring down at the paper, I didn't understand what it meant. Did I pass some type of challenge? Maybe a game? I honestly didn't know. That's when the familiar ding of the door gave me a slight heart attack. Landon, how's it going, bro? It was Tyler, my best friend who I just about wanted to strangle to death for the scare he just gave me. After calming down, I explained what just happened, and I could tell he didn't believe me. Okay, man, how about I stay with you for the rest of your shift so you don't see any more spooky ghosts? Laughing as he finished, I took him up on the offer, and the night flew by without anything else happening. When the opener finally came in, I quickly gathered my stuff before making my way towards the door. However, he stopped me before I made it out. Oh yeah, be careful on your way home. Apparently some dude crashed into a ditch last night. You never know what kind of people are on the road. I went pale, slowly turning back towards him, and cleared my throat. You wouldn't know what kind of car the guy was driving, would you? Seconds passed like minutes as I could see him thinking. Yeah, I think they were saying a big pickup truck or something like that. I could feel sweat fall down my face after hearing that. Nodding, I made my way to my car and rushed home. I've been home ever since, still trying to wrap my head around everything that occurred last night. Even while writing this, the burn mark is still sat on my wrist, reminding me of what happened. As I have been dwelling on everything, that mark reminds me more and more like some type of branding. Nonetheless, I have work again tonight, and after all that, I'm not game to just sit idly by and just wait for whatever's going on at the gas station to come and get me. I'm gonna go in a little early tonight and ask the guy who's closing if he's ever seen anything out of the ordinary. I'm hoping he may have some insight for me. If you have any idea of what might be happening, please let me know. I'll hopefully come back and be able to give closure to this whole ordeal. However, if I don't, assume the worst. When I was a kid, our family had a British short-hair named Charlie. He was mean to everyone but me. He was basically my cat. He used to roam around outdoors, but one day he never came back. I cried for days and went out looking for Charlie with my dad, but we never found him. I'm 27 now, and I've been living with my boyfriend for 3 years. When we first moved in, we had a cat in our neighborhood who used to sniff around the bins. We took to calling him Trash Cat, before just calling him Trashy. One time, a few kids walking to school kicked rocks at Trashy. One hit him right in the face. Trashy was tough. Stray cat, so he just ran at the teenagers and scratched one of the boys. The boy took his backpack off and started swinging. That's when I stepped in. I shouted at the kids like a grouchy old man. Trashy had run away during this. That's one thing we learnt about him. He was very skittish when it came to noises. One morning, Trashy was watching me from the front gate. I was leaving for work, so I knelt down to give him a pat, and he rolled onto his side. The next day, he was on our doorstep, so my boyfriend got the idea to leave a bowl of dry food and water for him. Trashy would eat and drink there every day. At some point, he just appeared inside our house, but we didn't make him leave. We loved him already. Trashy continued to roam outside. He would always be an outdoor cat at heart. He would sometimes leave for multiple days, and I would be distraught. "He'll come back," my boyfriend, Jason, reassured me. "If not for us, for the food." I got used to it. I would open the door to leave for work, and Trashy would be sitting there patiently. We eventually got a dog door for him to come and go as he pleases. One day we woke up to find patches of water around the house, and Trashy was soaking wet. He shivered, and we got a towel to dry him, but he wouldn't let us go near. "Did it rain last night?" I asked Jason. "No, the Bronsons have a pool. Maybe he got in." I was scared Trashy might drown. I'd never seen him swim before, so we got rid of the dog door, thinking that would solve our problems. But we kept finding him wet and leaving puddles around the house. Every morning Trashy would dash outside and only return when he was hungry. Eventually we stopped letting him out altogether, which only made him more anxious. We would find him wet, shivering, and cold, hiding on the second floor of our house. "We'll set up a GoPro," Jason suggested. We bought the cheapest GoPro we could find and attached it to Trashy's collar. At night, we turned it on, and the recordings were saved directly to my PC. After a few uneventful nights, we watched the footage. Trashy simply roamed around the house, jumped onto the kitchen benchtop, which he wasn't allowed to do, or slept. I started to feel relieved. Maybe it was just a temporary phase. However, one night I awoke to Trashy yowling and the sound of splashing water. My boyfriend was at his apartment that night, and though I was afraid to go downstairs alone, I couldn't let Trashy get hurt. I ran downstairs, flicking on every light, and searched every room but couldn't find him. The yowling and splashing suddenly stopped. Then I heard something running upstairs. I held my breath and approached the staircase, calling softly, "Trashy." Trashy poked his head around the corner. He was drenched again, and so was the camera. I logged onto my computer and found the latest recording. Before the camera had died, it was disorientating to watch the world from a cat's perspective. The house looked completely different, and I had trouble following where he was. While I was skipping through the video, I came across a scene that didn't make sense. Trashy was in a dark room with a blue light and swimming in some kind of water. I dragged the recording back 2 minutes and hit play. Trashy approached the grandfather clock that came with the house. I thought he was going to walk right past it, but instead he slipped through a paper-thin gap. Behind the clock was a hole in the wall that led to a thin staircase. Trashy trotted down and stopped at the last step. There was a small square room flooded with water. Trashy was staring at the surface. All of a sudden there was splashing and Trashy fell in the water, yowling. He managed to climb out and ran halfway up the stairs before turning back and staring at the water for a long time, before running up to the second floor where I found him. I called Jason and had him come over immediately. "Does that mean you could advertise it as a 3-bedroom house?" he asked. "I'm not in the mood for jokes." Together we slid the grandfather clock to the side. There were already scratch marks on the hardwood floor. The hole, funnily enough, was about the size of a dog door. "There's no way I'd fit inside," Jason said. "I might." We didn't test that theory. Since Trashy could slip through the gap, we boarded up the hole with a large wood chopping board and a 3-liter jug of water. It was more weight than Trashy could nudge out of the way. Jason slept with me that night. We had Trashy in the room with us and the door closed. Later during the night, I woke up to use the ensuite bathroom and found my bedroom door wide open. "Jason, get up," I whispered. Jason groggily rolled over. "What is it, babe?" "The door," I replied. We sat in bed, both confused since neither of us had opened it. Suddenly we heard splashing and Trashy yowling louder than ever before. "Come on," I urged Jason. We rushed downstairs to the living room. The bucket had been pushed over, spilling water on the floor. In that moment, all I cared about was saving Trashy. "Trashy?" I called, but the splashing continued. I lay on the floor and carefully slipped one arm through the hole, shuffling my body until I was inside. The hole opened up to a narrow stone staircase. I crept down, guided only by touch, until I reached the final step. Before me was the square room, with a flashing blue emergency light and filled with water. I couldn't tell how deep it was, but I could hear the splashing. "Trashy, come here," I called again. Trashy cried. In the dim, pulsating light, I could make out Trashy's frail silhouette as he desperately flailed his front paws. But he didn't move. He was stuck on something. I dropped into the water and swam towards him. The water was a swirling mix of black and blue. My heart hammered in my ears as I thrashed about. I reached out and closed my trembling hand around Trashy's soaked fur. Then I felt it, a sudden tug. I reached behind to remove what Trashy was caught on, and it grabbed me. A cold, bony hand. I tore my hand back and grabbed Trashy, kicking my legs wildly. I swam back to the stairs, screaming for Jason. "Babe, what's happening? Babe!" Jason shouted. "There's something in here," I yelled. I managed to get out of the water. Trashy, agitated and scratching me, broke free from my grip and slipped back out through the hole. I crawled after him. "Pull me through." I emerged, and together we moved the grandfather clock back in front of the hole. 20 minutes later, the police arrived. They borrowed a hammer from our toolbox and bashed in the wall until it was large enough for one officer, Matthews, to duck through. He went inside and came back out. "It looks like you've got a little flooding, but the room's empty. Are you sure this is the only way out?" he asked. "What are you on about? It's as deep as a swimming pool," I argued. Matthews just shrugged. "It's dark and you were scared. You were probably imagining things." Later, I organized for contractors to come out. They drained the water and sealed the wall off. We haven't had any more incidents with Trashy since, but on some nights, I can still hear water splashing. I thought more and more about what Matthews had asked me. Are you sure this is the only way out? It all started terribly. My phone displayed Donna, my best friend's name, for the 4th time. Crap, crap, I cursed under my breath, frantically searching through my closet. Of course, I couldn't find anything decent to wear. She's gonna kill me for sure. After 5 minutes of relentless digging, I grabbed some clothes and changed quickly. Guess what? I wore the shirt inside out at first. Lovely. Murphy's Law had been in action since the morning began. I woke up late despite being a light sleeper. The phone charger wasn't plugged in. I didn't prepare anything beforehand for the stay over at Donna's house. You know the drill. I was supposed to be there at 4 p.m., but now it was almost past 5. The fact that she lived quite far didn't help either. Taking a deep breath, I started stuffing the duffel bag with whatever I could get my hands on. When my phone started ringing again, I put it on speaker. "You coming on a plane or something?" Donna's exasperated tone boomed. "I'm sorry. Have you even got out?" "Yeah, well," she sighed. "The weather's getting bad. Just come fast, will ya?" By the time I left, dark clouds were already rolling in, bringing occasional cold gusts of air. I hurriedly called a taxi and jumped in, praying for the rain to come pouring down after I reached. I texted Donna that I was on my way. I got a thumbs up as a response, a sign that she was super mad. I reclined on the seat staring at the window. Thankfully, there wasn't much traffic, allowing me to reach within 45 minutes. Just as I entered her apartment gate, I heard the pitter-patter of rain. A lucky moment indeed. Donna lived on the 7th floor of a residential apartment building. There was only 1 week left until our semester break was over. We did plan to have a sleepover before, but it never came to fruition. Finally, we agreed on a date after much discussion. I pressed the elevator button. I didn't quite enjoy riding elevators. That claustrophobic sensation, the gentle humming, the slight jerk that you sometimes felt in the pit of your stomach. Oh, the electricity, too. Nevertheless, my lazy butt would rather stand for an hour, but not climb up the stairs. The machine reached the ground floor with a cheery ding. I went in. Suddenly feeling a bit nervous, the 7th floor button lit up, and with a quick thump, the elevator began to ascend. The interior had mirrored walls with a green carpeted floor. The lack of handrails made it a bit risky, though. I fixed my hair and waited for the door to open. Instead of stopping at the designated floor, it kept going up. The hell? The display flashed level 9. The apartment only had 8 floors. I frantically pressed the emergency button to no avail. My phone showed no signal at all. My brain couldn't register what was happening. How was this even possible? With shaking hands, I tried to call Donna, despite knowing it wouldn't work. Texts were not being sent either. Beads of sweat crept down my forehead. The elevator's speed increased, making a whoosh sound. Everything started to spin. I leaned on the wall and put my hand on it with as much pressure as I could. It felt as though the walls were closing in on me. Hot tears rolled down my face. I noticed that my breath was fogging up. When did it get so chilly? The screen now flashed 50 in ominous, bold red numbers. The lights flickered slightly, threatening to go out at any second. I sat on the floor whimpering, and then it stopped. It occurred with such force that I almost crashed into the door. The elevator stood extremely still, the mechanical whirring being replaced by eerie silence. I was scared to make any sound. I placed my hand on the cold steel, sending shivers down my spine. The door moved. I squealed, backing away from the door. I slowly stood up and stared at the darkness ahead of me. Absolute pitch black. The light in the elevator didn't help much in illuminating the outside. My whole body trembled like a leaf. Should I even step out? God knew what was waiting in the inky blackness. I contemplated turning on the flashlight, but didn't for now. Wiping my face, I took a deep breath and stepped forward carefully. Don't blame me. What else could I have done? The floor underneath my shoes felt rock solid, and weirdly enough, my feet could sense the coldness through the rubber sole. The silence was so overwhelming that I could hear blood rushing through my veins. With sweaty palms, I turned up my phone's brightness and held it up. The place looked like a garage, empty and derelict. The peeling yellow walls were covered with stains that oddly resembled dried blood. I sure as hell hoped that wasn't the case. Strange red markings covered the entirety of the concrete floor, something of a madman's gibberish doodles. The longer I walked, the more the darkness hung like a cloak around me. Why was this thing not end? A sound. Low growling. I froze. It came from a corner, exactly where my phone's light was shining. It was a human. Well, not quite human. It was crouched on all fours, shaking back and forth like a pendulum. Blue, thin veins crisscrossed its hands, pulsating. Long, matted hair covered its face. The skin was so white it was almost glowing. Bones were poking out from all angles. I instinctively yelped, almost dropping my phone. That thing raised its head in a flash, gazing at me with opal black eyes. It smiled. It smiled. Too many rows of sharp teeth, no nose. It convulsed violently, producing a loud screeching noise. I noped out of there and started sprinting. The faint outline of the elevator seemed thousands of miles away, now radiating a crimson aura. I could hear that thing running just behind me, accompanied by a metallic wet sound, its hot breath tickling my ankles. I didn't want to imagine what would happen to me if it caught me. Suddenly I heard a ding. The elevator doors made a slight movement. My legs felt like lead, waiting to collapse at any moment. The air tasted sour in my mouth. Every cell in my body screamed to get away from that thing. 3. It let out a wail, its hand almost touching my leg. 2. The doors began to close. 1. Through the tiny gap, I shot inside like a bullet. Just before they closed, I saw the thing jump a foot above the ground, ready to pounce. Bang! Its body slammed against the metal, shaking the whole elevator. I sat down, hyperventilating, gasping for air like a fish out of water. The dim lights became brighter. The numbers returned to normal. I clutched my duffel bag tightly. Through my blurry vision, I looked at the time on my phone. 6:05 p.m. The exact time I got inside. I was descending. It stopped on the 7th floor. The relief that passed through my body when Donna's door showed up was otherworldly. I came out as fast as I could, not caring how hideous I probably looked. Safe to say, I don't ride elevators anymore. So, I am about 3 months postpartum, and I was wondering if any fellow moms have been experiencing this weird, what I can only guess, postpartum symptom. I'm hesitant to ask anyone I know for fear of them thinking I might be crazy, but I am desperate for answers because I feel like I'm losing my mind. Anytime my baby cries or I lose my patience with my husband, I see this thing just out of the corner of my eye. I'm not even sure how to describe it. It's almost like if a spider was a person, all lanky arms and long, skinny legs with gray paper-thin skin, and sunken black eyes hugging the walls as though it were growing out of them. I've only seen brief glimpses of it in those moments. Seen it disappearing around corners or sinking behind door frames. Once or twice I swore I saw it scuttling into a dark, shadowy spot on the ceiling. Just little things that I could write off as the sleep-deprived effects of a horror movie lover's mind. Until yesterday. Yesterday I was changing the baby after a nap, and he would not stop crying. His high-pitched wails piercing my ears like needles being shoved directly into my cochlea. Tears pricked my eyes as I zipped up his onesie, praying to whatever god there may be that he would calm down long enough for me to regain my sanity. Click, click, click. I paused my oncoming breakdown, the clicking taking me out of the crushing sense of defeat for a moment. Click, click, click. My eyebrows furrowed upon hearing it again. Slowly I turned my head in the direction of the sound, and there it was. At the edge of my sight, peering around the doorframe, was an emaciated figure shrouded in shadows. I froze, not wanting to look directly at it, for fear it would attack me or my son if it knew I could see it. My heart was racing. My son's cries were now muffled, background noise to the sound of that thing's horrible crackling joints. I could feel myself beginning to tremble, the tears from before now freely spilling down my cheeks, slowly. I pulled my son closer to me, now only small squeaks and soft mms escaping him as he nuzzled into my chest, unaware of the horror that loomed just a few feet away. Hey babe, do you remember where we put the extra bottles? The rest aren't finished being sanitized yet. The sound of my husband's voice startled me out of my fear-frozen state, and I snapped my eyes shut for a moment. And in that moment, the thing had vanished. No clicks, no footsteps, not even the sound of a parting breath. Shocked, I looked around frantically. hoping that the thing hadn't scurried away to some other part of the room and wasn't lying in wait to try and ambush my baby and I once I moved. Nothing. I heard my husband coming up the stairs and tried to collect myself before he could see how frazzled I was. "Elena, you up here?" His sturdy frame entered the doorway, his dark brows furrowed in innocent confusion that melted into concern as his eyes fell on me. "Are you okay?" I stared back at him, wide-eyed and teary. From my spot by the changing table, for some reason I felt like I couldn't tell him. I was sure he'd think I was crazy, and maybe I am. Yeah, I just had some healing pain in my stomach, and Gabriel wouldn't stop crying, and I just got so overwhelmed, and his strong arms took me in, hugging me gently. Our son enveloped between his parents, warm and safe. This should have eased me. This should have taken all my fears away. This should have set everything right, but I could hear it again. Click, click, click. Please, for the love of God, tell me some of you other freshly postpartum moms have experienced something like this. Please tell me I'm not crazy. Please tell me that me and my family are safe. Please. I don't even know where to start with this one. I just remembered this encounter the other night and I had to post it. It was a few years ago. I was working at a grocery store. I worked there with my friends Josh and his girlfriend Trinity. We would try to plan things on our days off together so we could hang out. I should have ignored the text. If I had, none of this would have happened. It was 2 days before my day off, and I remember waking up to the buzz of my phone vibrating against my nightstand. I squinted at the screen, still half asleep. "Josh, you off Thursday?" Me. "Yeah, why?" Josh. "Don't make any plans. Me and Trinity have a surprise." That was it. No context, no details. Just a cryptic message that immediately had me curious. I should have known better. Josh was always dragging me into his weird stuff. Urban exploring, sneaking into places we weren't supposed to be. Testing out all those haunted legends people whispered about. Half the time it was just abandoned buildings and graffiti-covered tunnels. Nothing ever really happened, but to be honest, I loved it all. But something about that message stuck with me. Maybe it was the way he worded it. A surprise. Like it was something special. I texted back asking what he was talking about, but all I got was, "Just trust me, pick you up at 7. I should have said no. I should have told him I had plans, even if it was a lie. Because now, after what happened, I keep thinking, Josh didn't find that place. It found us. I had decided to vlog the day for YouTube. We went to Sevierville, grabbed food, and then as the sun sunk behind the mountains, we headed to the old house on Sulfur Springs Road. You might have heard of it. The one everyone says is cursed, the one with all the stories about people going missing. Apparently it was a small makeshift hospital during the tuberculosis outbreaks in 1954. I've heard about it for years, but I never actually thought any of the paranormal stuff was real. But it is. It's real, and now I wish we'd never gone there. The house sits deep in the woods, way off the main road. It's huge, way bigger than I expected, like some kind of decaying mansion swallowed up by the forest. 3 stories tall, dark and rotting, with thick ivy creeping up the sides like the earth was trying to pull it back to hell. The windows were shattered, gaping like black mouths. The front porch sagged like it was on the verge of collapse, and the whole place smelled like damp wood, rust, and something rotting. Josh was the one who pushed the door open. It barely took any force. The hinges let out this awful screech like the house itself was screaming. Inside, the air felt sinful, thick, heavy, It was cold, but not in a normal way. More like the cold was inside you. There was furniture left behind, but it was unsuitable. A rocking chair in the corner, rocking on its own, just like in the movies. Clearly the gust of wind from the door opening was the cause. But that didn't make it any less creepy. A long dining table with plates still sitting there, covered in dust, like whoever lived here left in the middle of a meal and never came back. But the worst part? The portraits. Lining the hallway were these old, cracked paintings. Portraits of people whose eyes followed you no matter where you stood. Their faces were faded, but I could still make them out. One of them was a woman in a white dress. We didn't stay long. Trinity was freaked out from the second we walked in. "We shouldn't be here," she kept saying, rubbing her arms like she was freezing. Even Josh wasn't cracking jokes anymore. So we left. But as soon as we stepped outside, I felt it. That pressure that grows on the back of your neck. The one everyone knows but tries to ignore, like we were being watched. I turned back to scan the house one more time, and that's when I saw her. She was standing in the upstairs window, looking down at us. She was wearing a white Victorian-style dress, yellowed with age. The lace was ripped, the fabric hanging off her like it had once been elegant, but now it was something tattered. Her hair was long, gray, tangled. It framed her face in limp strands, her skin pale, almost cracked. Her lips were bleeding and split open. At first I thought they had been stitched shut, and the bleeding was from the threads being ripped out. But then she smiled, and I saw her teeth. Too many of them, rows of them. Her mouth stretched wider than it should have, like her jaw could unhinge, like she could swallow something whole. I grabbed Josh's arm, my chest tight with panic. "Do you see her?" Trinity was the first to react. She screamed, grabbing onto Josh like she was about to collapse. Her nails dug into his arm, and that's when the woman moved. She tilted her head, her smile growing, and then she raised a hand. She waved at us. She waved, but it wasn't a normal wave. It was slow, unnatural, like her bones barely worked, like she was inviting us back inside. She almost floated away from the window, then in the direction of the stars leading down to the front door. That's when we ran. We tore through the trees, branches slapping at our faces, our feet stumbling over roots. I could feel her watching us, like her eyes were digging into my back. Then Trinity fell. Josh and I stopped and turned around to help her up, and we looked back up towards the house to see if the woman was following us. The house was gone. The clearing was still there, the trees still bent like something used to be there, but the house itself, it just wasn't. Then Josh's car alarm went off. All the doors were open. We didn't even shut the doors, we just jumped in and floored it, tires skidding against the dirt. Josh didn't stop driving until we were miles away. Trinity wouldn't stop crying. I wouldn't stop shaking. Josh and Trinity won't talk about it. Did we all have a shared hallucination? Maybe some sort of delusional moment, some sort of echo from the past from all the despair from the house. I know what we saw. I know the terror we felt, but the worst part? When I got home, when I finally made it to my room, I saw something. A piece of fabric, a shred of white lace, sitting in the middle of my floor. I don't know how, but I think she followed me home. It was during the spring break of my second year at college that I got a phone call from my Uncle Andrew, asking me if I'd be willing to spend a few days over at his house. My grandfather had been sick for a long, tough while, and it had apparently gotten to the stage that the primary focus now was less to treat him, and more so to just make him as comfortable as possible for the time he had left. I can't say I envied anyone in the situation. Grandpa who'd be getting ready to face eternity in a house that wasn't his, with no company but a son who he barely spoke to these days. And Andrew, whose girlfriend died giving birth to their daughter 7 months ago, and was now tasked with taking care of a dying man on top of that. I'd like to act as if I was making a saintly decision to come over and offer a helping hand out of love for my family. But the truth was that it had been quite some time since I'd spoken to Andrew last, and it had been forever since I'd spoken to my paternal grandfather. No, I went because I was lonely, unbearably so. I don't have any friends to speak of at college, and ever since my mother passed away about a year ago, I'd had no one to talk to at all. I made the decision to help Andrew out of the desperation for proper social interaction. Not like there'd be much to it anyway. All I really imagined I'd be doing is keeping the baby out of his hair when he was too busy and getting Grandpa anything he needed. Andrew's house was out in the sticks, at least 40 minutes away from the nearest town. My family are mostly dotted around a generally quite rural county, so there wasn't much in the area but barren roads and the odd building or two. As for the house itself, there wasn't really much to say about it from the front yard. Just another isolated double story that someone called home. I rang the doorbell, and after a few moments Andrew greeted me. He seemed more or less the same as the last time I'd seen him in the flesh. "Ah, Nick, how are you doing? Thanks so much again for coming." He smiled, his voice nothing if not welcoming. "Nah, not like I had much going on anyway," I replied, to which he chuckled. "Come on in. Throw your jacket on the hanger there. You want some coffee?" "Sure," I said. "Yeah, all right. Have a seat over in the living room. First door to your left." I took his invitation and made my way over. Now that I was fully inside, I could see that there was more to Andrew's house than meets the eye at first. It smelled like old books and something faintly musty, the scent of time that slowly claimed everything. The entryway was wide and dimly lit, with heavy curtains blocking out the daylight. There was a quiet rhythm to the house, the creaking of wood beneath our feet, the soft shuffle of Andrew's footsteps echoing through long corridors. It had the basic interior of a house, a lot older than you'd think it was from outside, with aged patterns across the wallpaper and somewhat ornate type of miniature chandelier suspended from the ceiling. Clashing with these design decisions was the more minimalist furniture and art pieces hanging from the walls. It seemed like someone had taken these measures in order to give the inside of the building a more modern feel, but really, it was a band-aid on a bullet hole. I looked around after reaching my destination. The living room appeared comfortable enough, with an ever so slightly peeling couch, a worn rug, and shelves of books that didn't seem to have been touched in years. It was the kind of place that felt frozen in time, a bit musty but lived in, as though the walls had absorbed the memories of countless years of family life. A minute or so later, Andrew entered with 2 mugs. I sipped mine slowly as we exchanged some admittedly uncomfortable small talk. "God, you look so grown up. It's been, what, 2 years?" It had been at least 5. This continued for a while until we got to the tasks that'd be at hand for the next number of days. "I'll be picking him up from the hospice tomorrow after work. I'll probably be close to 7 before we'll get back. Chloe's upstairs having her nap right now, so I'm gonna go and get started on making dinner. In the meantime, you go ahead and make yourself comfortable. There are 2 free rooms upstairs. You can take your pick." He rose and clapped me on the shoulders before heading over to the kitchen. "I really do appreciate it, Nick. It's been rough having to pay for babysitters." After going upstairs, I passed what must have been Andrew's room on the way down the hallway. Another chamber masquerading as belonging to a home far younger than was the reality, with a double bed and a child's cot next to it. The baby sleeping soundly inside. I had a mountain of college assignments to get cracking on. So I'd brought my laptop and sociology textbook in my travel bag. That's how I spent the majority of the evening, taking an hour's break for dinner. We had another fairly awkward conversation about what I'd been getting up to in college. Spoilers, nothing. From my seat at the dining room table, I was able to look out the window at a filth-coated golden retriever pottering around the yard outside. I hadn't noticed it before. I was surprised that Andrew was able to manage a dog on top of his life as a single father. As I tried to focus on my pork chops, something else caught my eye. There was a door in the corner of the room that I hadn't noticed before. A small door, almost entirely hidden behind another old bookshelf. I couldn't see much of it, but there was something about the door that captured my attention, something in the way the wood seemed to shimmer in the dim light, as though it wasn't quite real. "Is that a closet?" I asked, pointing. Andrew looked over his shoulder and then shook his head quickly. "Oh, that? No, just a small little space in the structure I haven't really found a use for yet." He smiled, but it was tight, forced. I was going to ask him more before the dog outside started barking loudly. "God, what's his problem?" Andrew sighed, exasperated. "Hey, you never mentioned you had a dog. Seems like an awful lot of work for you," I commented. "Nah, he's not mine. Just some stray that's been finding the yard lately for whatever reason." The conversation petered off after that, but I remember thinking that, if that was the case, it was odd that the dog had a collar. I called it a night maybe 2 hours later, but I had a hard time sleeping because the dog continued to bark periodically until all hours of the morning. In the morning, Andrew was already gone to work when I awoke, but he left instructions on the kitchen counter for taking care of Chloe. I'd babysitted before as a teenager, so I could manage things fine, but it never really gets any more enjoyable changing a diaper. Other than that, there's not much to say about the day other than I'd tried checking out the door behind the bookshelf out of curiosity and boredom, but I'd found it locked. I didn't really care though, since it sounded like it was nothing more than just a small crawl space or something. When Andrew arrived home, wheeling Grandpa with him, I could see for myself just how sick he must have been. He had stage 3 skin cancer, and had by now spread through a terrible amount of the tissue in his torso. Andrew would tell me later on that night that he had 2 weeks left, tops. The man looked like a skeleton, his complexion beyond wrinkled and pale, his head like a skull with its eyeballs left intact, along with a few pointlessly added tufts of snow-white hair. His skin was hanging off of his body so loosely, as if the space between had been repeatedly filled with air and then deflated. I'd been hoping I could at least have some sort of conversation with him, since I'd seen him even less in my life than Andrew. But he could barely work a sentence together, mostly just murmuring, grunting, and pointing at things to communicate. The evening ended up being even more uncomfortable than the last, so I spent even more time with the company of my schoolwork, figuring Grandpa would probably prefer to be with his son anyway, especially seeing that, as far as I knew, they barely ever saw each other either. I ended up just going to bed early. Grandpa in the room next door, but of course I was kept up for ages by that stupid dog again. I ended up spending, I think, another week at Andrew's, and I'm not going to recount every day from here on, since it ultimately doesn't really matter much to where I am now. Andrew had to keep going to work, of course, so it fell to me to keep watch of Chloe and help Grandpa take his medicine. The only words that he could consistently get out, or perhaps the only ones he cared to, were his frequent complaints about the various pains in his body. My skin, the muscles, the flesh. I'd heard before, not from my father, but from my mother, about how Grandpa didn't treat him and Andrew very well. He was a Vietnam vet, and the war came home with him, rearing its head in the form of a bottle and the abuse that resulted from it. Even in spite of that, I couldn't help but pity the pain he must have been experiencing for the last few months of his life. All I could do is keep encouraging him to choke down his pills. During the second night with Grandpa in the house, I was woken up yet again by the incessant barking of the dog outside. After the dog had seemingly knocked it off to annoy someone else, I was quickly drifting back to sleep, until I heard Grandpa mumbling something next door. I'd gotten accustomed to his mostly nonsensical mutterings throughout the day, and the house had thin walls, so I didn't think too much of it until I heard another voice speaking back to him. Andrew's voice, whispering, just audible. "No, I've told you already. It's not happening, so get it out of your head." "You know you have to," came Grandpa's slow response. His voice was like the creaking of an old floorboard, but he sounded far more lucid than I'd ever heard him before. I don't remember their conversation continuing beyond that point. I heard the door open softly, then shut again, and I didn't have enough energy to ponder what I'd heard for long before I fell back asleep. The next day, I decided to find out from Andrew about it in private. "Hey, so sorry if I'm being too nosy here, but I heard you and Grandpa talking about something last night. It sounded like you were arguing," I asked. He sighed deeply. "Look, you've probably realized by now that this house is a lot older than you might have expected. Truth is, it belonged to him. Your father and I grew up here. He's just, well, he's not happy with how I've been running things here, that's all. You know how older guys are really particular about that sort of thing." He looked conflicted about what he'd said, and the silence between us was deafening. "Come on, I just managed to get Chloe asleep 5 minutes ago. Let's get to bed for tonight." I can't say I was entirely satisfied with that answer, but I could sense Andrew didn't wish to discuss the matter any further, so I obliged him. On the bright side, there was no barking from the dog that night, or any of the following nights for that matter, so I slept well, at the very least. I don't have anything to say about the day after that. Other than that, the uncomfortable atmosphere in the house was only getting worse. Grandpa spent all his time alone in his room, just sitting in his wheelchair in the corner, mumbling nonsense to himself. Andrew and I delivering his meals to him, giving him his pills and sharing some unspoken weight about it all between us. That night, I was woken up by another argument in Grandpa's room. Grandpa's voice was no louder, no more commanding, but I could sense an undeniable rage in it. "You are a fool. You always were. I know what you did last night. You think that's enough? It has to be me. You don't deserve it. You treated us like dirt. It doesn't matter if I deserve it. It has to be me, and it has to be tomorrow." I didn't fall back asleep quickly after that. Actually, I don't think I got any sleep that night. I didn't know what any of it meant, but Grandpa's words scared me. The following day, Grandpa's door was locked from the inside. Andrew also stayed home from work, and he looked terrible. I knew I had to ask him what happened last night, but I decided to give some space until the evening. I barely saw him all day. To be honest, the only perception I had of him was the tired cooing to Chloe every now and then, the unlocking and relocking of Grandpa's door as he took pills every 3 hours, and a dinner we shared in silence. In the end, it was he who came to me. "You heard us last night, didn't you?" I nodded. "Yeah, I guess you deserve to know at least this much. I don't imagine your parents ever told you before they were gone." He looked like he was about to either scream or break down in tears. I'm not sure which. "Your father and I had a younger sister once, Phoebe. I was 8 when she was born, your old man 11. My mind raced trying to fit this into my family history. He wasn't lying. I'd never heard so much as a word of this throughout my life. She went missing when she was 5, just gone without a trace. They never found her. Dad started drinking a lot more after that. I didn't know what to say. That tomorrow Dad was talking about is the anniversary of the disappearance. I think the memories just hurt him the most today. They hurt me the worst today, too. He was crying now. I'm sorry, I managed. I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. No one ever told me. Andrew rubbed his eyes, steeling himself. Look, I'm sorry too. You should never have needed to know, really. He started heading for the stairs. I'm gonna try and get some sleep. Please, if you hear anything from him tonight, or if I have to come in to him again, just ignore it. Please. It hurts everyone enough as it is. With that, he headed up to his room, shutting the door behind him. I was stunned. How much else had I not known about my dad's side of the family? Even with what I did know, I was left with more questions than before. It didn't make sense how the truth about my dad and uncle also having a sister could link to everything else I'd overheard between Grandpa and Andrew. Why did it have to be Grandpa? What had Andrew done last night? What the hell even was it? My mind swam as I laid awake in bed that night. I think it was the state of fog in my brain that actually ended up putting me unconscious for a few hours, as it happened. But one last time I was awoken from my sleep, but it wasn't by the barking of a dog or by voices from Grandpa's room next door. It was by slow, heavy footsteps descending the stairs. I know Andrew told me to ignore anything I might hear that night. To this day, I don't know what compelled me to leave my room, but I crept out the door quietly. And the first thing I realized is that Grandpa's door was open, and his room empty. The footsteps continued to pound through the house into the kitchen, it seemed. I had to know. I had to know the truth to everything that was going on in this house, and I sensed that I was right at the cusp of it. As silently as I could, I too descended the stairs. I followed the noises to the kitchen, and I realized then what I'd been overlooking the whole time, the sight of it filling me with total dread. The door behind the bookshelf, now wide open. I abandoned whatever idea of stealth I had left in my head, rushing over to the door where I found that it wasn't some sort of small little cupboard or crawl space at all. It was a flight of stairs down to what must have been a cellar. Why had Andrew lied about this? I flew down the stairs and turned to the cellar door on my right, pressing my ear against it. Deep, heavy, fatigued breathing, and the surface of the door felt almost as if it was vibrating, pulsing with some impossible force. I gripped the door handle, and it felt white hot. My hand turns. The door opens. The truth is revealed. Andrew was alone in the cellar, illuminated by one dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling, the kitchen knife in hand. No sign of Grandpa anywhere. Andrew barely reacted to my presence. He just kept staring at the wall opposite of him. Only, it wasn't a wall. Not really. Where there should have been brick and wallpaper, a pulsing, oozing, red-brown expanse of flesh spanned the side of the cellar ahead of us. The drywall at the edges of the adjacent walls transitioning from plaster and sheet brick into living tissue. The wall heaved and throbbed, and sweat, somehow horrifically, impossibly given the gift of life. I can't even begin to describe the smell. The smell was disgusting. I could barely think. The sight of it almost made me feel mad, like I had found myself in a bizarre nightmare. Any rational thoughts shackled away behind lock and key. What the... I choked. What is this? Andrew, what is this? Where's Grandpa? He turned around, seemingly broken out of a trance. He stared back at the wall for a second. He was right, I heard him say. More to himself than to me. He turned back. He was right. It had to be done. I glanced back around him to the putrid, fleshy mass before my eyes. No, he couldn't mean that. No, Andrew, where's Grandpa? What have you done? I begged, denying to myself what I knew had transpired. Andrew glanced back at the wall again for a few moments. He had a look of almost reverence etched across his face. He faced me for a second, madness twinkling in his eyes. It's what he wanted. No, you're lying, I roared, not believing myself one bit. What even is this? He didn't look away from the wall of flesh. I inherited it, I suppose. It had to be done, you know? It's what he wanted. The wall suddenly flexed outward grotesquely, emitting a low, grumbling sound. Try as I did to deny it to myself in the moment, I knew what that must have meant. As I saw a look of concern flash across Andrew's face, it was hungry again, needed to be fed soon. Clearly, Grandpa wasn't a fitting meal. Amidst the grumbling, we could both suddenly hear a high-pitched noise, piercing through it. Chloe crying from upstairs. Andrew stared up at the ceiling, then back over to me. Don't, I whispered, but he was already charging towards the door. Andrew, don't! He shoved hard against me as I tried to block him from getting out of the door. I threw myself against him with everything I had, tried to wrestle the knife from his grip, but he was far stronger than he looked, overpowering me quickly and slashing my right leg. I howled in shock and pain. You know what? He hissed, throwing me to the ground and grabbing me by my legs as I gushed blood. This is even better. You're of far more use anyway. I realized in an instant what he meant as he dragged me towards the wall of flesh. No, I choked. No, Andrew, please. God, My words were cut off as I became almost entirely immersed in the writhing, living mass. Tendrils wrapped around me, almost painlessly puncturing through my skin, connecting to me. For a few brief passing moments, I had the notion that I was linking, fusing to the grand biological system of the wall, that soon all would be alive. All would be connected before my mind went black. After an unknowable length of time, I grew more and more aware of my surroundings once more. The bizarre, weightless sensation of simultaneously feeling out of my body and feeling one with another body. Then something cold, foreign. I've got you. I've got you. I fell forward into someone's arms, the cold air of the cellar enveloping me in an instant as I screamed out. I looked up. I was surrounded by a team of men in yellow hazmat suits, working to fully cut me down from the wall of flesh. I laid in their arms, feeling the way I imagine a newborn infant must, my body and mind focusing entirely on trying not to seize up from how overwhelmingly cold everything seemed. A few minutes later, once I'd been fully freed from the wall, I was given sedatives that knocked me back out. I don't know how long I'd spent like that, but it must have been at least a few days, because it was my girlfriend, Emily, who had called the police after I hadn't responded to a number of her calls. In the end, though, I was kept in some sort of containment facility for a day, where I was asked a great deal of dubious-sounding questions that I couldn't begin to answer for the most part, and they never ended up finding Andrew. In the end, though, Emily took me back home. Whatever classified part of the government that covers up stuff like this did just that, and life mostly moved on. I tried my best to forget about that brief, hellish stint of my life. I certainly didn't gain any sort of enlightenment or newfound appreciation for life by my experience. I was changed by it, I guess. Who wouldn't be, but as I said, life moved on. Emily was invaluable in ensuring that, comforting me about it when I needed her to, but never acting like it defined me now. Life moved on. 4 years later, I asked Emily to marry me. 5 years later, she was my incredible wife. 8 years, and she gave birth to the joy of our lives, our daughter Lily. I loved my wife. Of course I did, but there's absolutely no feeling of adoration on this earth that compares to holding your own child in your arms. And yes, of course, I still felt scared by my experience all those years ago. One night as we were in bed getting ready to sleep, I told her about it once more, how even though things are fine now, Things are perfect now. I still had nightmares about the wall of flesh sometimes. I still get sent into near panic attacks at the sight of an open wound. She held me in close. "I know you do, love. I know you do," she murmured, her voice drowsy but full of care. "But you've got me, don't you? You've got us." I closed my eyes and felt myself beginning to drift off as she held me closer still. I breathed in the beautiful smell of her rose-scented shampoo. "It's okay, because I've got you." "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you, got you, I've got you." I fell forward into the man's arms, the cold air of the cellar enveloping me in an instant as I screamed out. I looked up all around, staring at the yellow-suited men, still screaming and babbling incoherently. I laid in their arms, still smelling the rose-scented shampoo, though there was now something horribly wrong with it. Like how after you realize the trick of an optical illusion, you can never see it as you originally did. Pheromones. It turns out, the wall had been digesting me for quite some time indeed. I saw my reflection. I looked emaciated, barely alive. It showed me wonderful things. Now I sit alone in my cold, dark apartment, looking outside at gray skies. I think of my wife's smile. I think of my child's laughter. I want to go back. I've been a trucker for years, long enough to hear every tall tale there is about seeing something crazy on the road. Every trucker has one, and you tire of hearing them pretty fast. You're hunched in a grease-stained diner, just trying to choke down a diesel-tasting coffee before slinking back onto the highway. But some grizzled, long-haul vet on the next stool over is talking your ear off about the time he saw a UFO, or picked up a hitchhiker he couldn't see in his rear view. It's exhausting. The voices change, the faces blur together, but the stories stay the same. Only now it's my mug spitting out an outlandish tale to anyone who will listen. And I don't like it, because I'm not spinning some crazed yarn in hopes of spooking the fresh-faced truckers. I'm giving them a cold, plain warning. Because these things, they're out there, and they might be coming to you. It was one of those nights so dark you'd forget there was ever any light in the world. No stars, just black rolling clouds smothering the sky. My headlights were an island of light in the infinite black. The white lines on the road rippled past in a hypnotic flow. I'd driven this stretch of road before and dreaded every minute of it. There was nothing but long grass on either side, rolling outwards in endless tufts. No landmarks, nothing interesting. Just the kind of mindless, featureless terrain that has you tasting the solitude. About the only noteworthy thing that was out there, something spooky happens to anything electrical. The old guys call it dropout. Your radio dies down to a numbing crackle. Your headlights shrink into narrow little bands. I heard explanations ranging from some weird mineral in the ground to an alien spaceship sapping away your voltage from up above. But all that mattered was that it was real. It was annoying. Because of the dropout, I barely saw the pickup. My headlights were so dim they barely caught in the glass. Was that a windshield? I hit my exhaust brake and snapped on my high beams as the rig rumbled to a halt. In what little light they could manage, I saw the white body of a pickup truck slumped on the shoulder, driver's door hanging open. I rolled in behind it, tires churning up gravel, and killed the engine. Hopping out, I craned my neck in all directions. Nobody. The truck was roadside repair setup. It had a winch in the back and a brushed steel side bin brimmed with tools, chains, and cables. There was a cartoon detail slapped on the door, Tony's Roadside Repairs. Cute, but where was Tony? I placed a hand on the hood. Cold. Hadn't run for hours. Leaning into the cab, I saw the keys dangling from the ignition, turned a quarter. The radio spewed out a steady stream of quiet, meandering static. Maybe he went to take a leak. Hello? Nothing. All I could see around me was grass tumbling in the wind, rolling outwards in waves before giving way to darkness. I've got a job to do, I told myself, as I climbed back in and peeled onto the road, my hands pinching the wheel in a vice grip. This hull won't drive itself in, I thought, as the white line started whipping by, and guilt brewed up in my stomach. I drove a short distance before reaching the tunnel. It was old school, a jagged mouth punched through the mountain with dynamite God knows how many decades ago. It yawned open, and once inside, the world shrank. The only light came from a handful of buzzing sodium lamps, caged in rusted wires and bleeding sickly orange down the cut stone walls. Maybe 3 of them still worked, the rest were dead, leaving whole stretches of the tunnel buried in thick, impenetrable dark. I plowed into the darkness, feeling like I was driving a submarine, like there was no world out there, just me and the truck. Then, somewhere in the middle, something pierced the black. 2 amber lights blinking softly in and out. Hazard lights? Somebody broken down? That explained where Tony ended up. I tried my high beams again, but they flickered in and out before settling on a weak glow. Dang it. I pulled it over to the tunnel side, my mirror almost touching the rock, and dug around for my flashlight. As I opened the door, the humid air draped around me like a blanket, cold but rich with some ungodly odor. Not quite rot, not quite mildew. It smelled almost like the ocean. Not surprisingly, my flashlight was on the brink, leaving me with a dull, flickering beam to fight the darkness. I cast it as far ahead as I could as I tried to make out the car. Hello? Anybody there? My voice bounced down the tunnel, meeting no response. But there was something shuffling around up ahead, a dark silhouette by the lights. The torch beam was too weak to make out any details, but there was something there all right. Someone. As I clattered onwards, the silhouette took on a shape. A man. He was waving, hinging his arms back and forth. There was something strange about the motion. It was slow, lethargic. Up, down, like a puppet. You okay there? As my voice reached him, he started shuffling, like something was dragging him back. He stiffly collapsed into his driver's seat. I kept going, the hazard lights drawing me onwards. Blink, blink, blink. As the dull torchlight spilled along the car's silver body, I noticed it was odd. I know cars. I spend half my life staring at their taillights, cursing them under my breath. I can name makes and models by the shape alone, but this? It was nothing like a Toyota, a Kia, or a Chevy, just car. The kind of thing a kid would draw come to life. The hazard lights pulsed intensely, rippling in a fit against the dark. I looked back at my thready headlights, shook the flashlight, and watched the beam cut in and out. How come this guy's not hurting for volts? I was close enough now to really look at the bodywork. It wasn't metal. The torchlight splattered beneath its surface, filtering red, unveiling a twisted network of fibers, veins, coursing through the panels, and the whole thing was moving, undulating gently in and out, breathing. My feet froze to the ground. I panned the flashlight over the driver's side window. The body in the driver's seat was pale, paper white, clouded eyes, bulging from their sockets, mouth hanging agape. On his shoulder, a round white patch was sewn onto the jumpsuit. Tony's roadside repairs. A dull amber light began to leak from his open mouth. I should have ran. I was too late. Something long spewed from the body of the car, tearing and whipping through the damp air. I was yanked off the ground before I knew what was happening, an immense pressure crushing my ankles together, grinding bone against bone. It had me. I clawed at the tarmac as I was dragged back, losing fingernails but desperately trying to fight the pull. I kicked, I thrashed, I screamed. I twisted my body until the boots were wrenched clean off my feet. The tentacle flung them into the darkness and flailed in anger. I didn't waste a second. I bolted away with a speed I didn't know I had, body electric with fear. I ripped open the door of my truck and threw it into reverse, stomping the accelerator through the floor mats. I watched the dials spike into the red. The engine shuddered to the point of stalling, wanting to die right there, but I willed it to go on. Out there, the car was coming after me. Not driving, but walking, scuttling on a tangle of segmented legs sprouting from its undercarriage. The headlights pushed out of the body on stalks, pulsing with furious yellow light. I couldn't even watch it chase me. My eyes darted between my mirrors. I could barely make out the white flanks of my trailer, but I had to. I frantically steered and counter-steered, keeping it in line. If I jackknifed in the tunnel, I was dead. But then my mirrors caught them. More lights. Amber. Flashing. Another figure chiseled out of the darkness, drunkenly waving its arm. This time I really saw it. He was little more than a skeleton. Long, desiccated hair plunged from a yellowed skull. The tatters of a denim jacket and what looked like bell-bottoms hung from the bones. I saw the bones were lashed together by a network of little tentacles, their tips gently glowing, blinking in amber. From the neck, the tentacles braided together into a thick, glistening appendage, feeding back into the car. Anglerfish. Poor fellow was the lure. This car was old. Big round headlights, wood panels, rear fins. It was from back when cars used to have edges. My trailer clipped its cadaverous lure as I shot past, shattering bone into puffs of powder. A shriek, wet and angry, rattled through the tunnel. It yanked its broken lure inside itself and spat out a crazed, thrashing tentacle. It seized my mirror, tearing it from the cab and tossing it into the void, but I was clear. I kept reversing. The truck was screaming at me. Warning lights I'd never seen before erupted on my dash in an expansive rainbow. The engine shuddered so hard I thought it would leap out of the hood. But I kept going until the rock of the tunnel peeled away, and the black night sky rolled above my head. Then I stopped. The tunnel mouth yawned. Within its shadow, amber lights flickered. 10, 12, 15, I wasn't sure. How many of those things are in there? Needless to say, I skipped the tunnel. I backtracked until I had the weakest bar of signal and called the cops. Then spent the rest of that night with my eyes glued to the windshield. My head dipped once or twice, but I wouldn't let myself sleep. The bright steel morning singed my eyes by the time the patrol car trundled in next to me, the cop tapping my window, lukewarm coffee in hand. They knew about Tony the mechanic. He was reported missing the previous night. They went in, scoured the tunnel with their spotlights, but found nothing. That didn't surprise me. They acted funny, sure. They tried to look taken aback by my story, but every raised eyebrow was well practiced. Every, your mind plays tricks on you in the dark, and you sure you weren't drinking? Rehearsed to a T. They know what's in that tunnel. Dealing with cases like me, like Tony. That's just Tuesday morning, so all I can do to help anyone is warn them. If you see a broken down car on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking away in the dark, you might feel like stopping, like being the good Samaritan, ever eager to help change a tire, or lend out your jumper cables. but these creatures evolved to feed on that very kindness. And they're hungry, very hungry. Do not stop. I needed a job, badly. When I found a listing for a night clerk, $50 an hour, easy work, I didn't ask too many questions. The ad was vague. Monitor the front desk, follow the guidelines. That was it. No experience required. No background checks. It sounded too good to be true, but desperation makes you ignore red flags. I showed up for my first shift at 11:45 p.m. to a nondescript office building on the edge of town. The lobby was sterile. White walls, tile floors, a desk with an old CRT monitor. The only person there was a short, pale man with hollow eyes and a pressed gray suit. He handed me a single sheet of paper, his expression unreadable. "Follow these rules exactly," he said, voice flat. "And whatever you do, don't break them." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. The rules. 1. The phone will ring at midnight. Do not answer it. 2. If the elevator doors open on their own, do not look inside. 3. You may hear typing from the empty office at the end of the hall. Ignore it. 4. If you hear knocking on the front door, check the monitor first. If there's nothing there, do not open it. 5. The man in the security uniform will come in at 2:16 a.m. Do not speak to him. 6. If you find a sticky note with your name on it, burn it immediately. 7. The vending machine sometimes dispenses items you didn't select. Do not eat anything you didn't order. 8. If the lights flicker, close your eyes and count to 30. Do not open them before. 9. You must clock out at exactly 6 a.m., not a minute before, not a minute after. 10. If you realize you've broken a rule, hide immediately. I was too tired to argue, so I took the list and settled behind the desk. At midnight, the phone rang, an old landline on the desk. Instinctively, my hand twitched toward it, but I caught myself. Do not answer it. The ringing stopped after 3 chimes. At 12:47 a.m., a slow rhythmic clicking came from the far end of the hall, the empty office. Ignore it. My fingers dug into my palms as I forced myself to keep my eyes on the screen. The typing stopped a few minutes later. At 2:16 a.m., the security guard arrived. He walked in without acknowledging me, heading straight for the vending machine, standing stiffly in front of it. I avoided eye contact, but the reflective glass, I caught a glimpse of his face, or lack thereof. He had no features, just smooth, blank skin where his eyes, nose, and mouth should be. I kept my gaze down. Eventually he left. By 3:30 a.m., I had convinced myself the rules were just elaborate mind games. But then I saw it. A yellow sticky note on my desk. My name was on it. My breath hitched. My hands trembled as I fumbled for the lighter in my pocket, flicking it on. The note curled black at the edges, turning to ash between my fingers. A sharp knock echoed through the lobby. Knock, knock, knock. I swallowed hard and checked the security monitor. The glass doors showed nothing but an empty parking lot. Do not open the door. I gripped the desk, knuckles white. The knocking stopped. My pulse slowed, but then I realized I had broken rule number 6. I was supposed to burn the note immediately. I had hesitated. A cold wave of dread crashed over me. Hide immediately. I dove under the desk, heart pounding. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin. Silence rang in my ears, loud and suffocating. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the desk. I squeezed my eyes shut, barely breathing. A whisper drifted down to me. "You were doing so well." The footsteps stopped. I waited, paralyzed. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. Finally, the air shifted. Whatever was there, it was gone. At 5:59 a.m., I crawled out shaking. My eyes locked onto the door, waiting for 6 a.m. exactly before punching out. As I stepped outside, the sun barely rising, I felt different, like something had changed. When I got home, I collapsed onto my bed, exhausted. My phone buzzed. A new email. Second shift confirmed, 11:45 p.m. tonight. I never signed up for another shift. I tried to quit, called the number from the job listing. No answer. Then I checked my bank account. I had been paid. Twice. Once for last night and once for tonight. The money was already there. The job wasn't over. And I don't think I'm allowed to leave.